The first scream of crows shattered the silence. Liam's heart froze where he stood, a half-split log still clenched in his hands. His eyes darted to the edge of the meadow where the tall grass shifted like something alive he thought it might be. The wind until he saw Rex's German shepherd standing rigid at the tree line. The dog's hackles bristled, teeth bared, but not an attack. Instead, his body leaned protectively forward, blocking something hidden behind him. Liam dropped the log, his pulse rising. "Rex, what is it?" His voice cracked, carrying more fear than he intended. The dog didn't turn his head, didn't so much as flick an ear in recognition. His stare was fixed, unwavering, on the circling crows above. The black wings wheeled tighter, their cries sharp and hungry, before diving low enough to reveal what they sought. That was when Liam finally saw it, a nest tucked into the dip of the roots, pale eggs exposed in the grass. The sight was strange enough, but what rooted Liam in place was Rex's refusal to move. The shepherd's body was trembling, muscles taut with the effort of holding his ground. Every time a crow swooped close, the dog lunged with a snap of his jaws, scattering them back into the air. Yet when the threat retreated, he returned to his stand, steady, immovable, guarding something that was not his to protect. A chill slid through Liam's chest. It had been 3 days since he last heard the warbler's song that usually filled these woods at dawn. He remembered the streak of wings, the mother bird fluttering nervously above the clearing. But she hadn't returned. The meadow had grown silent without her, and now only Rex stood watch over the fragile shells left behind. He should have called the dog away, should have snapped his fingers and broken the spell. But there was something about the way Rex stood, as though an unspoken vow bound him there. It wasn't instinct, it was devotion. Liam found himself whispering instead of commanding, his voice softer than he meant. "You've taken this on, haven't you?" The hours stretched strange that day. Liam tried to carry on splitting wood, hauling water, but every time he glanced toward the clearing, Rex was there. The dog refused food, refused water, refused even to rest in the shade. His eyes never strayed from the nest, and his body never shifted from its guard. At dusk, when the coyotes yipped faintly in the distance, Liam's stomach twisted with unease. He half expected Rex to abandon the vigil, to return at least to the porch for safety. But as night spread across the meadow, the shepherd only pressed closer to the nest, a silent sentinel beneath the darkening sky. By the second night, Liam began to wonder if this was no simple instinct. He laid awake, listening to the muffled thud of Rex's paws pacing before settling again into that same spot. The dog seemed drawn to the eggs with a loyalty that bordered on desperation, as though he understood they were unfinished lives in need of a guardian. Liam found himself walking to the clearing at dawn, watching Rex's weary eyes lift toward him but still refusing to leave his post. And then came the twist that sent Liam's heart into his throat. Just as the sun crept up on the third morning, the silence was broken not by crows, but by a shadow sweeping low across the meadow. The mother bird, ragged, frantic, alive, had returned. She spiraled down, wings beating frantically, her chirps sharp with accusation. Rex didn't flinch, didn't bare his teeth at her. Instead, he lowered his head, stepped back with a trembling hesitation, and let the bird land beside her nest. Liam stood in stunned silence, a knot rising in his chest. For 3 days his dog had starved, had fought off predators, had endured the cold night air all for something fragile that wasn't his. And now, as the mother tucked herself gently over her eggs, Rex sat a few feet back, his body trembling not with fear, but with exhausted relief. The meadow felt alive again. The crows circled once, frustrated and defeated, before vanishing into the tree line. The wind stirred through the grass, and the sound of the warbler's song, thin but steady, returned at last. Liam knelt, running his hand over Rex's rough coat, his voice heavy with a pride he couldn't contain. "You held the line," he whispered. "You kept them safe." Yet even as the sun rose higher, the question burned in Liam's mind. Why had Rex done it? What unseen thread tied him to those fragile eggs, binding him with a loyalty no one had asked for? It wasn't something Liam could answer, not yet, but he knew this much. The story had only just begun. The storm arrived with no warning. The moment the meadow was bathed in gentle sunlight, and the next the sky had collapsed into a bruised wall of clouds. Liam was on the porch when the first thunder rolled across the valley, the sound so deep it rattled the boards beneath his boots. He knew what storms could do to nests like that, whined, tearing branches loose, rain-soaking fragile shells until they cracked under their own weight. His first thought wasn't of his roof or the woodpile stacked by the shed. It was of Rex. The shepherd had not moved since dawn, even as the wind began to churn and the air grew heavy with the metallic temps of rain. The dog remained in his post, ears pinned back but body rooted. Liam called once, sharp against the building gale, but the sound was carried off before it could reach. The first sheet of rain slashed through the meadow, flattening grass in its path, and Liam cursed under his breath. By the time he grabbed his coat and splashed across the yard, Rex was already pressed low to the ground, his body curved protectively around the nest. The rain poured down in blinding sheets, lightning cracked across the sky, and each flash illuminated the shepherd's soaked fur, plastered dark against his ribs. His teeth were clenched, his chest heaving, but still he didn't move. Liam dropped to his knees in the mud beside him, his hands reaching instinctively, but Rex growled low in his throat, not in threat, but in warning. It was as if the dog was saying, "Don't interfere, this is mine to endure." Liam's chest tightened with something raw and unspoken. He had never seen such stubbornness, such devotion carried through pain. Then came the twist that made Liam's breath catch. The mother bird had returned just hours earlier, her small body now drenched and shivering in the storm. She tried desperately to settle over her eggs, wings spread, but each gust lifted her slight frame off balance. Twice she was thrown back, into the grass, chirping in frantic protests. It should have been her duty to guard the nest, but the storm was merciless, and she was too small to bear it. So, it was Rex who leaned in, pressing his body closer, shielding her and the fragile shells with his bulk. The bird trembled beneath his fur, as though she, too, understood that her survival hinged on his presence. The storm raged through the night. Liam stayed nearby, soaked through and powerless, his hand resting against Rex's flank whenever the lightning gave him a glimpse. Hours blurred together, the dog's body shuddering with cold, his eyes closing and reopening with sheer force of will. By dawn, the meadow was a field of broken branches and torn grass, but the nest against all odds remained untouched. The eggs were still intact, pale and perfect, and the mother bird chirped weakly as if in thanks. But Liam saw what it had cost. Rex staggered when he finally shifted, his legs trembling from exhaustion. His eyes were bloodshot, his fur streaked with mud, his body gaunt from days without food. Liam reached out, steadying him, his voice hoarse with pride and worry. "You're going to break yourself," he murmured, though he knew the words were wasted. The shepherd's gaze drifted back toward the nest, unwilling to abandon it even for a moment. For the first time, Liam wondered if this devotion was more than instinct. He had raised Rex from a pup, trained him to guard the farm, to protect the family, but this was different. This was not duty to Liam or loyalty to a command. It was something deeper, older, as though the shepherd had chosen this fragile mission for himself, and that terrified Liam, because he didn't know how far Rex would go, or what it might cost him in the end. By the second day after the storm, danger shifted again, this time from the sky to the ground. A fox's shadow slinked through the tree line, its eyes sharp and gleaming. Liam spotted it while chopping wood, the red shape weaving low through the tall grass. He dropped the axe, heart hammering, but Rex had already seen it. With a snarl, the shepherd lunged forward, his bark splitting the air. The fox froze, tail flicking, before darting back toward the woods, but not before Liam caught the hunger in its gaze. The message was clear: the nest would draw more than storms and crows. That night, Liam lay awake, listening to Rex's steady pacing outside the cabin. He had given the dog food, water, even a blanket by the porch, but Rex ignored it all. Every sound of the night, the snap of a twig, the whisper of wind, was met with the dog's growl or sudden stillness. The shepherd was wearing himself thin, but Liam understood now nothing would tear him from that post until the fragile lives in that nest either hatched or perished. And so the days stretched on, each one a test of will. The meadow seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the eggs to break, waiting to see what would emerge. Liam felt it too, the mounting tension, the weight of something larger than himself unfolding in his own backyard. The story was no longer just about a nest, it was about Rex and the unshakable, mysterious vow he had made. But as the fifth day dawned, Liam noticed something that made his stomach twist. One of the eggs had begun to crack, and with it a new question rose in his mind, sharp as the lightning that had split the sky. If Rex had fought this hard to protect them, what would he do when the fragile lives inside finally broke free into the world? The rain came hard that third night, drumming against the roof of Liam's cabin until the walls seemed to tremble. He lay awake, listening not only to the storm but to the silence where Rex should have been. The shepherd hadn't returned to the porch, hadn't barked for shelter. When Liam finally lit the lantern and stepped out into the wet night, he saw the dog's silhouette fixed in the meadow, a lone figure pressed against the fury of the rain. Lightning split the sky, revealing Rex hunched low, his ears flattened, still guarding the nest as if nothing else in the world mattered. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the earth soaked and steaming. The mother bird was there, wings spread over her eggs, but her feathers hung heavy, plastered to her body. She looked fragile, trembling from the ordeal. Rex, soaked to the skin, sat close enough to shield her from scavengers, yet distant enough to give her space. His eyes were glassy, his ribs showing sharper than Liam remembered. The dog had barely eaten in days. Liam knelt beside him, his voice quiet, careful. "You'll break yourself for this, won't you?" He offered a piece of bread, but Rex only lowered his muzzle back toward the nest, dismissing food as if it no longer held meaning. Something deeper bound him here. Something Liam couldn't quite name but felt like a thread pulling taut through both of them. That afternoon brought a new sound, low, guttural and chilling. Liam froze, scanning the tree line where shadows shifted between trunks. He knew it before he saw it, a fox, lean and desperate, its red coat bristling as it crept into the clearing. Its eyes glowed with hunger, fixed squarely on the nest. Liam reached for the axe, leaning against the cabin wall, but Rex was already moving. The shepherd's growl rolled through the meadow like thunder, his body crouched and ready. The fox halted, ears twitching, then slinked low to the ground, circling wide. Liam's heart hammered as he stepped forward, gripping the axe tighter. But he saw the truth in Rex's stance. This was the dog's fight. Every muscle in Rex's frame pulled toward the intruder, but still he didn't abandon the nest. He stood between predator and prey, the living shield the eggs had somehow been given. The standoff lasted long minutes, broken only by the fox's circling and the steady drum of Liam's pulse. Finally, with a hiss, the fox lunged. Rex met it in midair, the clash erupting into a tangle of fur, teeth, and snarls. Liam shouted, racing forward, but the fight was already raging. Rex's jaws snapped, his body twisting to throw the smaller predator aside. The fox yelped, struck hard, and tumbled into the grass before scrambling back toward the trees, vanishing into the dark line of pines. When silence returned, Rex stood panting, his flanks streaked with blood where sharp teeth had cut him. The dog's legs trembled, but his body angled back toward the nest almost instantly, as though nothing else mattered. Liam dropped to his knees, hands searching through the fur. But Rex resisted every touch, straining forward until his body blocked the nest once again. The twist of it left Liam shaken. He expected to feel triumph after the fox's retreat, but instead there was only dread. Rex was breaking himself apart for a duty that wasn't his, and now the wounds made every shallow breath sound like a clock ticking down. The mother bird, oblivious to the cost, fluttered her wings and shifted back over her eggs as though nothing had happened that night. Liam couldn't bring himself to leave. He sat on the porch with the lantern burning low, eyes fixed on the meadow where Rex lay curled in the grass, too weak to sit upright, yet still close enough to guard. The stars stretched wide above, cold and indifferent. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the faint sound of the warbler's call returning again and again. Fragile but insistent. By morning, the air felt different. The meadow was bright, washed clean by the storm, but Liam's chest tightened at the sight before him. Rex struggled to rise, his legs shaking beneath him. He staggered but refused to collapse, his gaze fixed once more on the nest. The devotion was unearthly, as though the shepherd had taken on a burden no human could have demanded. And then came the sound, a hairline crack. So softly Liam thought at first it was his imagination. He stepped closer, heart caught in his throat, until he saw it clearly. One of the eggs was shifting, rocking faintly beneath the mother bird's weight. Another crack followed, louder this time, a fragile shell giving way to something alive. Inside, Rex, exhausted and wounded, lifted his head higher, his ears twitching at the sound. Liam pressed a hand to his chest, unable to breathe. The fight, the storms, the long nights, it had all been leading here. But even as the miracle of new life began, he felt the danger thickening around them. A fox driven off once could return, and the meadow was never free of predators for long. The shepherd's devotion had carried them this far. But Liam knew the cost was climbing, and the question lingered like a shadow over the clearing. How long could Rex hold the line before something broke his body, the nest or the fragile bond that bound them all together? The storm rolled in without warning, black clouds tumbling over the ridge and swallowing the last trace of sunlight. Liam watched from the porch as the first drops spattered against the dust, turning it dark and heavy. He thought Rex might finally retreat from his post, but when the thunder cracked and the sky opened wide, the shepherd only pressed closer to the nest, his fur plastered with rain, his body hunched against the wind. Liam's chest tightened with helplessness. He wanted to call him in, to wrap him in the warmth of the cabin and tell him his duty was done. But when he stepped into the clearing, Rex growled low, not at Liam, but at the forest itself. Lightning split the sky, and in that flash Liam saw what had set the dog on edge. A fox, lean and red, slipping through the grass with eyes fixed on the nest. The scene froze for a breath. A clash of instinct and devotion, before Rex lunged. His bark ripped through the storm, a violent warning that made the fox halt mid-step. The animal's teeth bared, its body low to the earth, and Liam's heart pounded as he felt the fragile balance of the meadow teeter. The eggs lay helpless, in the grass, the mother bird clinging to her perch above, wings flicking in panic. Rain hammered down harder, blurring the world into streaks of silver and shadow. Rex stood squarely between the fox and the nest, his body shaking from exhaustion yet refusing to falter. Liam shouted, his voice swallowed by the storm, but it was Rex who decided the outcome. He charged a sudden, desperate burst of strength that startled the fox into retreat. The predator vanished into the undergrowth, leaving only the crackle of thunder and the ragged rhythm of Rex's breathing. When it was over, Liam knelt beside his dog. Rex's sides heaved, his eyes dull with weariness, yet his posture didn't soften. Even in victory he held the line, unwilling to yield until the danger was gone. The storm raged on, but Liam realized something had shifted. This was no longer just about eggs or the return of a mother bird. It was about Rex himself, about a loyalty so fierce it bordered on sacrifice. As lightning flared again, Liam felt the weight of it. His dog was breaking himself for a cause he couldn't explain, guarding lives as fragile as shells against the endless cruelty of the wild. And though the meadow still trembled with the storm, Liam understood that the truest test had only begun by the fourth morning. The storm had passed, leaving the meadow washed clean beneath a pale sky. The air carried the sharp scent of wet earth, and mist drifted low across the grass. Liam stepped out, his boots sinking softly into the mud, and his eyes searched immediately for Rex. The shepherd was still there, hunched close to the nest, his coat damp and clinging, his frame thinner than it had been just days before. Yet when Liam approached, Rex lifted his head with a quiet dignity, his eyes glassy with fatigue, but still burning with purpose. The mother bird fluttered down, more frantic now than before, chirping as if urging him to move. She tucked herself once more over the fragile eggs, trembling wings folding to shield them, but Rex refused to step away entirely. He circled once, settling just at the edge of the roots, a silent guardian even as his strength began to waver. Watching him, Liam felt both pride and sorrow. It was as though the dog had given more of himself than any creature should, binding his spirit to something so fragile, so easily broken. As the hours stretched, the silence deepened, broken only by the occasional cry of the bird. Then, just as the light began to tilt toward evening, a faint sound came from the nest. Liam froze where he stood. At first he thought it was only the shift of branches, but then it came again, sharp, fragile, undeniable. A crack, small and tentative, echoed beneath the mother's chest. Rex's ears twitched, his head lifting slowly, his gaze fixed with wonder on the fragile shells. One by one the eggs stirred. The mother bird shifted carefully, and beneath her, tiny beaks tapped against brittle walls. Liam knelt, holding his breath, as the first shell split open, revealing a trembling, featherless creature that lifted its head toward the fading light. Another followed, and then another, until the nest pulsed with the fragile stirrings of new life. The meadow seemed to still in reverence, as though even the wind dared not intrude on the miracle unfolding in the roots of that tree. Rex didn't move closer. Instead, he lowered himself into the grass, his chest pressed flat, his breath shallow but steady. His eyes shone with something softer than triumph, something Liam could only describe as relief. He had endured hunger, storms, and the teeth of the wild for this moment, for the fragile stir of wings that now filled the clearing with sound. The fight was over, and he knew it. Liam laid a hand gently on Rex's side, feeling the steady but weakened rise of his ribs. "You did it," he whispered, his voice breaking under the weight of it. "They're safe now." The dog closed his eyes for a moment, leaning into the touch, before turning his gaze back to the nest as though unwilling to look away from what he had protected. That as twilight deepened, the warbler sang again. Her voice, sharp and clear, carried across the meadow, rising above the hush of evening. It was not the desperate call of a bird searching for what was lost, but the triumphant hymn of one who had returned to find her young alive. Liam listened, his throat tightening, and glanced down at Rex. The shepherd's eyes followed the bird's every movement, and though his body trembled with exhaustion, there was peace in the way he rested now. The meadow no longer felt empty. It pulsed with renewal, with the fragile heartbeat of life continuing against all odds. Liam knew he would never forget the sight. His old dog, battered by storm and hunger, guarding a nest of eggs as if they were his own blood. In that moment, the line between instinct and devotion blurred until it disappeared. What remained was something purer, something wordlesser, loyalty that asked nothing, gave everything, and left its mark long after the meadow fell silent. As the last of the light slipped from the sky, Rex lowered his head onto his paws, his gaze still fixed on the nest. The warbler's song faded into the distance, and Liam stood in the hush, knowing he had witnessed something few ever would. Not just survival, not just instinct, but the quiet, enduring proof of devotion. The meadow would forget, the forest would move on, but Liam knew the story would stay etched in his heart forever. A shepherd who guarded not his master's home, not his own kind, but a fragile cradle of life until it could breathe on its own. And when the night closed in, that image, Rex watching over the hatchlings in the dying light, lingered like an ember that refused to fade.